A new CBS News and YouGov poll finds 76% of likely GOP voters are more concerned that Trump's indictment is politically motivated than the documents being a national security risk. That same poll shows Trump is still the clear front runner. 61% of Republican primary voters would vote for Trump if the presidential election was held today, while 23% said they would vote for Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Joining me right now is Stagwell chairman and CEO and the Harris poll chairman Mark Penn. He's also a former senior advisor to the Clintons. Also joining us is Fox News' political analyst, Gianna Caldwell. He is the author of the book, Taken for Granted. Gentlemen, great to see you both. Thanks very much for being here this morning.
Thank you.
Mark, I spoke with another pollster recently, Trafalgar's Robert Cahaley, and he told me when he asks voters who they want to vote for, in his polls, they choose Trump for number one and number two. It was just incredible when he said that to me. What are your thoughts on these legal battles and how that could affect Trump's chances in terms of the 2024 election?
Well, there's no question that the legal battles are being viewed through a partisan lens. Most voters, particularly Republicans and independents, see these as politically motivated and don't see them in line with the treatment of Joe Biden and the Corvette documents or Hillary Clinton and the smashing of her various devices. They just don't see a fair treatment. And I think that's a real problem for the country. In terms of the politics of it, it seems for the second time so far to have strengthened Donald Trump's lead within Republican voters. But I do caution this primary is not over. 51% are considering DeSantis. Tim Scott also has a large group of voters considering. The primary season is just beginning, so it's not over, but he is continuing to have a very strong lead among these Republican voters.
Gianna, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think from the polling, it's obvious that Republican primary voters are realizing, or rather in their own lens, seeing that the country led by the Biden administration is turned into somewhat of a banana republic where there's a two-tier set of justice, one for the elites that they favor, and everyone else, they get the injustice that Donald Trump talked about in that speech and that clip you just ran. I do see that the field is changing from the polling to people who don't want to have President Trump rehash the 2020 election. They're more interested in the kitchen table issues like inflation and taxes, as Republican primary voters typically are. But it looks like by all accounts, and to Mark's point, obviously this isn't over and polls don't vote. And it's a state-by-state election, but people are really securely and strongly behind Donald Trump. I think one of the bright spots for some Republicans having Tim Scott on the ticket, having that, not just simply that diversity, but that diversity of messaging, very positive, uplifting, American the beautiful messaging. So he may be putting himself, Tim Scott, in a position where he can be a very, very strong vice presidential candidate. And if the race really turns, who knows what could happen. So this is an interesting field and dynamics that we're seeing thus far.
Well, what are the most important issues right now, Mark? I know that inflation was top of mind. It's come off of the highs. But I feel like one of the reasons Trump is where he is because of the corruption. And people see that this uneven level of justice is one of the issues. Do you think that is what is driving voters?
Look, I think the unequal application of justice is driving primary voters to, I think, express even stronger support for Donald Trump. But it's not the major issue. Inflation, economy, immigration, crime, these bread and butter issues, I think, come out of the poll very clearly. And there's an opening there for the primary candidate who really speaks to those issues, who takes a balanced budget position, who really begins to have an anti-inflation program that shows he or she's got experience about, how to handle the economy. I think that's an opening because the voters don't want to talk about legal cases. They do see the Biden administration, Department of Justice, as unfair, but they want a president that's going to solve the problems. And that's going to be a very important balance here for how these candidates get into this primary.
And what would you say about the numbers today versus what it could look like as we get closer to the election after primary season? What have you seen in the past in terms of when you see someone in the lead so early on?
Yeah, generally what I've seen is if Trump were at 65, probably he'd be impossible. If he were at 35, he'd be pretty easy to unseat. In his 50 to 60 positioning before the primary, he's a probable winner, but still could be unseated. And when you think about it, there's about 40 to 50% of the Republican voters that won't vote for Trump, and he's got about 25% of his own voters that are considering others. So it's not over. He's the favorite.
So, Gianno, you wrote an entire book about being taken for granted. What about the African-American community in terms of where they're leading right now? What are you hearing?
Well, in terms of this particular race, obviously Joe Biden has lost support with the African-American community, but there's no other candidate on the D side that is outside of Robert Kennedy Jr., but that really has the chance of winning. So that's a whole separate race. We don't see a lot of Republican, black conservative voters in the Republican primary, but people really are leaning towards Ron DeSantis, I think, to some degree. So Mark just mentioned how there's almost 50% of Republicans that won't vote for Trump. We see Ron DeSantis, who does have a record, a very successful record in Florida. We don't know what's going to happen with these criminal cases against Donald Trump. It's anyone's guess what's going to happen. And if anyone tells you they know what's going to happen in this race, don't believe them, because we just never know what could happen. And I think Elon Musk said it really well, that it appears that there's a two-tier system of justice and how there's more interest in going after Donald Trump, which does, I believe, help Donald Trump, because his messaging was clear. They're not going after me. They're going after you, the voter. I'm fighting for you. And I think that influences a lot of Republican voters to stay and support him. But at this particular time, it's anyone's guess what's going to happen next.
Yeah. All right, gentlemen. Great conversation. We so appreciate your time. Mark Penn and Gianno Caldwell, thank you so much.